The massive Zarkax warship loomed over Earth's orbital defense station like a predator sizing up its prey. Through the station's reinforced viewports, Commander Sarah Chen watched with gritted teeth as the alien vessel's shadow eclipsed the sun, casting an ominous darkness across humanity's last line of defense. The station's warning systems blared, their urgent tones mixing with the sound of her racing heartbeat. Pathetic, the alien commander's gravelly voice crackled through the communication system. Your species sends a mere handful of vessels to defend your homeworld. We expected more from the self-proclaimed defenders of Earth. The mockery in his tone was unmistakable. Sarah's fingers tightened around the command console as she surveyed the tactical display. True, Earth's fleet seemed impossibly small compared to the Zarkax armada, just 15 ships against their 100. But size wasn't everything, and humanity hadn't survived this long by playing by others' rules. Station 1 to Fleet Command. She broadcast on the encrypted channel. The enemy is in position, requesting authorization to proceed with Operation Wasp's Nest. Her voice remained steady despite the stakes. Everything they'd planned for the past 5 years came down to this moment. Fleet Admiral David Torres' response came almost immediately. Authorization granted, Commander. Show them why they shouldn't have underestimated us. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she keyed in the activation sequence. The Zarkax had made the same mistake as every other alien species that had tried to conquer Earth. They assumed bigger meant better. They never bothered to look closer at humanity's tiny fleet, never questioned why a species known for its resourcefulness would field such a small defense force. Through the viewport, she watched as the first Zarkax ship fired its weapons, massive energy beams that could tear through conventional shields like paper. But Earth's ships didn't try to dodge. Instead, they did something the aliens had never seen before. They split apart. What had appeared to be 15 modest-sized vessels suddenly fractured into hundreds of smaller craft, each one piloted by a human crew member. The tiny fleet was actually a cleverly disguised carrier system, housing a swarm of advanced strike fighters specifically designed to exploit the one weakness humanity had discovered in Zarkax technology: their inability to track multiple small targets simultaneously. What trickery is this? The alien commander demanded, but Sarah could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. Before he could react, the first wave of Earth's true fleet was already weaving through the gaps in the Zarkax shields, targeting vital systems with surgical precision. That's humanity's answer to your mockery, Sarah transmitted back. You see, we learned something important during our first encounters with alien civilizations. It's not the size of the fleet that matters, it's how you use it. The station's sensors lit up as the battle began in earnest. Hundreds of small, agile Earthships darted between the massive alien vessels like angry hornets, their specialized weapons finding weak points that larger ships could never exploit. The Zarkax's powerful but cumbersome weapons struggled to lock onto the nimble human craft, often firing into empty space or, worse, hitting their own ships in the chaos. Sarah watched the tactical display with growing satisfaction as the first Zarkax vessel's shields began to fail. This was just the beginning. Humanity's response to years of being underestimated by spacefaring civilizations that thought size and brute force were all that mattered in warfare. As she prepared to coordinate the next phase of the attack, her thoughts drifted to all the superior smirks and dismissive comments Earth's representatives had endured in galactic councils. How many times had they been called primitive or insignificant? How often had their warnings been ignored, their strategies dismissed? But humanity had turned those prejudices into advantages. While the Zarkax and others boasted about their dreadnoughts and planet crackers, Earth had been developing something different, a combat doctrine that played to human strengths, adaptability, unconventional thinking, and the ability to work together in perfect coordination when everything was on the line. The battle was far from over, though. Even as the first wave of Earth's fighters struck their targets, the Zarkax were already adapting, trying to modify their shield configurations to counter the human attack pattern. Sarah could see their massive ships beginning to move into a defensive formation that would make it harder for the smaller craft to find attack vectors. But that was exactly what she'd been waiting for. With a quiet command into her headset, she initiated the second phase of Operation Wasp's Nest. Now it was time to show the aliens why humans spoke so often about keeping an ace up their sleeve. Sarah's mind flashed back to the day that changed everything. The first Zarkax invasion attempt 3 years ago. She'd been a junior officer then, watching helplessly as conventional military tactics failed against their overwhelming firepower. The aliens had destroyed 4 of Earth's largest battleships in less than an hour, and victory seemed impossible until Captain Linda Hayes had done something unprecedented. Hayes had taken her damaged vessel, the UES Nimble, and split it into its experimental component ships, a maneuver that wasn't even supposed to be possible in combat conditions. The resulting confusion in the Zarkax targeting systems had created just enough of an opening for Earth's remaining forces to drive them back. It had been a desperate gambit that cost Hayes her life, but it had given humanity the key to survival. Commander, multiple Zarkax vessels are adjusting their shield harmonics. Lieutenant Tom Wilson reported from his station, pulling Sarah back to the present. They're trying to create a web pattern to trap our fighters. Sarah nodded, her expression grim but determined. Right on schedule. Signal all squadrons to begin the Butterfly Protocol. The name had started as a joke during training. If the enemy expected wasps, give them butterflies instead. But like everything else in this war, there was deadly serious intent behind the playful code name. As she watched, the swarm of Earth fighters began to shift their formation. Where before they had been striking hard and fast at vital systems, now they moved in an intricate dance of near misses and false attacks. To the Zarkax, it must have looked like their defensive strategy was working, forcing the human ships into increasingly desperate maneuvers. Their flagship is moving to the center of their formation, Wilson observed. They think we're getting sloppy. He couldn't quite hide the hint of satisfaction in his voice. Humans are so predictable, the Zarkax commander transmitted, his earlier uncertainty replaced by renewed arrogance. Your initial strategy showed promise, but now you fall back on crude attack patterns. This is why your species will never be more than a footnote in galactic history. Sarah didn't bother responding to the taunt. Instead, she opened a channel to Admiral Torres. Sir, they've taken the bait. Request permission to deploy the Gemini systems. There was a pause, just long enough for Sarah to know the Admiral was double-checking the positions of every ship in the battle space. The Gemini systems were their true ace in the hole, and timing would be everything. Permission granted, Commander. Give them hell. Sarah's fingers flew across her console, transmitting coded instructions to every fighter in the swarm. The Gemini systems were humanity's greatest technological achievement, and their best-kept secret. Each of the small fighters was actually 2 ships in one, capable of splitting again into even smaller, more specialized attack craft. The Zarkax had adjusted their defenses to deal with hundreds of fighters. They were about to face thousands. All units, execute Gemini split on my mark, Sarah broadcast. She allowed herself a moment to appreciate the elegant brutality of what was about to happen. The aliens had built their entire defense doctrine around the assumption that smaller ships meant weaker ships. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Mark. The space around the Zarkax fleet suddenly blazed with thousands of energy signatures as Earth's fighters split again, each one becoming 2 perfectly synchronized craft. But these weren't simply smaller versions of the parent vessels. Each new ship was specialized for a specific role, carrying weapons and systems that had been carefully hidden during the initial phase of battle. The Zarkax commander's shocked transmission cut off mid-word as the true nature of humanity's fleet became apparent. Their web-pattern shields, designed to trap larger vessels, were useless against ships small enough to slip through the gaps between energy fields. And these new craft were armed with weapons specifically designed to exploit those gaps. Status report, Sarah called out, watching as the battle space transformed into organized chaos. Alpha Squadron reporting multiple direct hits on enemy power distribution nodes. Wilson responded, his voice tight with concentration as he coordinated the attacks. Beta and Gamma squadrons are targeting their communication arrays. The enemy fleet's coordination is starting to break down. Sarah allowed herself a small nod of satisfaction. The Zarkax had always relied on centralized command and control, another weakness that stemmed from their belief in overwhelming force. Take away their ability to coordinate, and their mighty armada became just a collection of powerful but isolated ships. But even as Earth's forces pressed their advantage, Sarah knew they weren't out of danger. The Zarkax ships were still incredibly powerful, and a single hit from their main weapons could vaporize dozens of human craft. More importantly, the enemy still didn't know about the third phase of humanity's strategy. "Commander," Wilson's voice took on an urgent tone. "We're detecting power spikes in the enemy flagship. They're charging something big. Energy readings are off the charts." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical display. This was the moment they'd been preparing for, the reason every human pilot had spent countless hours in simulators practicing maneuvers that seemed suicidal at first glance. "All squadrons, initiate constellation formation," she ordered. "Prepare for Phase 3. As she watched the human fighters begin to move into position, Sarah thought about all the times alien species had dismissed humanity as barely space-capable. They saw Earth's ships as crude, limited things compared to their own massive vessels. None of them ever understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in the size of their ships or the power of their weapons. It was in their ability to adapt, to take what others saw as weaknesses and turn them into strengths. The Zarkax flagship's energy readings continued to climb to impossible levels. Whatever they were charging, it was clearly meant to be a knockout blow, something to end the battle in a single strike. But they still hadn't learned the most important lesson about fighting humans. No plan survives first contact with people who specialize in making the impossible possible. Sarah opened a channel to all Earth forces. Remember your training. Remember why we fight. And most importantly, she allowed herself a fierce grin. Remember that humanity's greatest victories have always come when our enemies thought they had us beaten. The battle was about to enter its final phase, and Sarah knew that what happened next would either secure humanity's place among the stars or end in disaster. But as she watched Earth's fighters moving into their final formation, she felt something she hadn't experienced since the war began: hope. Because she knew something the Zarkax didn't. The real reason humans had designed their ships to be so small, and they were about to find out. The Zarkax flagship's hull began to glow with an eerie purple light, energy crackling across its surface like lightning in a storm. Sarah had seen weapon demonstrations before, but nothing like this. Whatever they were charging, it was meant to end not just the battle, but to crush humanity's spirit entirely. "Energy readings are still climbing," Wilson reported, his voice steady despite the tension. "Their weapon signature doesn't match anything in our database. This is something new." Sarah took a deep breath, remembering the countless simulations they'd run preparing for this moment. "That's because they built it specifically for us. They wanted something that could hit every single one of our small ships at once." She allowed herself a grim smile. "Exactly as we predicted they would. The constellation formation was nearly complete now. Earth's thousands of tiny ships were arranging themselves in an intricate pattern that, from a distance, must have looked like desperate chaos to the Zarkax. But there was a method to this apparent madness, a plan 3 years in the making. "All ships report ready for Phase 3, Wilson announced. "Quantum sync is at optimal levels." Sarah opened a channel to Admiral Torres. "Sir, requesting final authorization for Project Starbridge." There was a longer pause this time. Project Starbridge was humanity's ultimate gamble. If it worked, it would change space warfare forever. If it failed, well, they probably wouldn't be around to worry about it. "Authorization granted," Torres responded finally. "Give the order, Commander." "And Sarah, it's been an honor." Sarah straightened in her chair, feeling the weight of the moment. Every human in the fleet knew the risks they were taking. They'd all volunteered anyway, because that's what humans did when their backs were against the wall. They got creative, and they got brave. "The enemy flagship's weapon is reaching critical charge," Wilson reported. "Estimated firing time in 30 seconds. Sarah nodded and opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Commander Chen. Initiate Project Starbridge on my mark." She paused, thinking of Captain Hayes and all the others who had died getting them to this point. Whatever happens next, know that Earth is proud of you. Humanity is proud of you. The Zarkax commander's voice cut through the communications again, heavy with smug satisfaction. Your formation is impressive, humans. A fitting final display before your extinction. Our new weapon will tear apart every one of your tiny ships simultaneously. There will be nowhere to hide, no gaps to exploit. You have lost. Sarah's response was calm, almost conversational. You know, that's the problem with your species. You're so focused on making things bigger, more powerful, more destructive. You never stop to ask why we made our ships so small in the first place. 10 seconds to weapon discharge, Wilson called out. All ships, stand by, Sarah ordered. The tension on the bridge was thick enough to cut with a knife. Remember your training. Trust your systems. Trust each other. The Zarkax flagship's glow had become almost blinding now, the energy buildup reaching impossible levels. Their weapon would fire any second, releasing enough power to vaporize everything in its path. 5 seconds. Sarah's fingers hovered over the final command sequence. Everything they'd worked for came down to this moment. You want to know why we built such small ships? She transmitted to the Zarkax commander. It's because size isn't just about offense or defense. Sometimes it's about something else entirely. 3 seconds. All ships, execute Project Starbridge. Now. In that instant, as the Zarkax weapon began to fire, something happened that defied everything the aliens thought they knew about space warfare. The thousands of tiny Earth ships, arranged in their precise constellation formation, activated their quantum sync systems simultaneously. The space between Earth's ships suddenly lit up with streams of energy, connecting them in a vast web of light. Each small vessel began to pulse with a bright blue glow, their experimental quantum cores working in perfect harmony. The Zarkax weapon discharged, releasing a massive wave of purple energy that expanded outward like a ripple in space itself. It was beautiful in its terrible power, a weapon designed to end the human race in a single strike. But as the energy wave approached Earth's fleet, the true purpose of Project Starbridge began to reveal itself. The quantum connections between ships started to shift and pulse, creating patterns that seemed to bend the very fabric of space. All ships report quantum synchronization at maximum. Wilson shouted over the growing rumble that seemed to pervade the station itself. The bridge is forming. Sarah watched as the impossible began to happen. The weapon that should have destroyed them was about to meet something that no alien race had ever imagined possible. Something that could only work because humans had fought small instead of big. The Zarkax commander's voice came through one last time, but now there was something new in it. Fear. What? What are you doing? This is impossible. That's humanity's specialty. Sarah replied, watching as the moment of truth approached, making the impossible possible. The purple energy wave was microseconds from impact. The quantum bridge was nearly complete, and in that frozen moment between destruction and salvation, Sarah Chen thought about all the times humanity had been dismissed as too small, too weak, too primitive to matter in the grand scheme of the galaxy. They were about to show the galaxy exactly why size wasn't everything. They were about to demonstrate why humans had survived every threat they'd ever faced. They were about to change the rules of space warfare forever, if they survived the next few seconds. The collision between the Zarkax weapon and Project Starbridge created a spectacle unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. As the purple energy wave struck the quantum network connecting Earth's ships, space itself seemed to shiver. For one breathless moment, the entire battlefield froze in a tableau of light and power. Then something went wrong. Commander, Wilson's voice cracked with alarm. The quantum sync is destabilizing. The bridge matrix is collapsing. Sarah's hands flew across her console, years of training kicking, and even as her mind raced to understand what was happening. The quantum bridge should have redirected the Zarkax weapon's energy, using their own power against them. Instead, the carefully constructed network was starting to unravel. Status report on all ships, she demanded, fighting to keep her voice steady. Multiple quantum cores are overloading. Wilson responded, his fingers dancing across his own controls. The energy patterns. They're not matching our simulations. The Zarkak's weapon is creating some kind of resonance effect we didn't account for. Through the viewport, Sarah watched as sections of the quantum bridge began to flicker and die. The Zarkak's weapon's energy was being contained, but at a terrible cost. One by one, human ships were burning out their cores trying to maintain the connection. "This is Fleet Admiral Torres to all ships," the Admiral's voice cut through the chaos. "Divert all available power to your quantum cores. We cannot lose this bridge." Sarah's mind raced. Something about this felt wrong. The Zarkak's weapon wasn't just powerful. It was specifically tuned to disrupt their quantum network. Almost as if, "Sir," she broadcast to Torres, "I don't think this is a coincidence. The weapon's resonance pattern. I think they knew about Project Starbridge." There was a moment of stunned silence on the command channel. The implications were staggering. If the Zarkaks had known about humanity's secret weapon, it meant there was a leak somewhere in Earth's defense network. But that wasn't the immediate problem. "Commander!" Wilson's shout drew her attention back to the tactical display. "The Zarkak's fleet is moving. They're splitting up." Sarah's blood ran cold as she watched the massive alien ships break formation. Instead of staying clustered together where a redirected energy wave would hit them all, they were spreading out to surround Earth's forces. If the quantum bridge failed now, there would be nowhere for the human fleet to retreat. "All ships, maintain formation," she ordered, even as warning lights began flashing across her console. "We cannot let that weapon energy break containment." But the Zarkaks weren't done surprising them. As their ships moved into position, new energy signatures began appearing on the tactical display. They were charging weapons, different weapons, smaller ones that wouldn't trigger the quantum bridge's containment protocols. "They're going to pick us off while we're trapped in the formation," Sarah realized aloud. The elegant simplicity of it was almost admirable. Earth's ships couldn't break formation without releasing the contained energy, but maintaining formation made them perfect targets. "Commander Chen," the Zarkak's leader's voice had lost all pretense of mockery now. "I admit, we underestimated your species' ingenuity. Project Starbridge is truly remarkable. But did you really think you were the only ones who could learn and adapt?" Sarah's mind raced. They needed options, needed a way out of this trap. But the quantum bridge was failing, their ships were burning out, and the enemy had them surrounded. Everything they'd planned, everything they'd prepared for, was falling apart. Then she noticed something on her display, a pattern in the quantum fluctuations that shouldn't have been possible. "Lieutenant Wilson, analyze the bridge collapse pattern. Does something look familiar to you?" Wilson frowned, studying his readings. His eyes suddenly widened. That's impossible. The collapse isn't random. It's forming a secondary pattern, like the one Captain Hayes created when she split the Nimble. Sarah felt a surge of hope as pieces started clicking into place. The Zarkaks thought they had countered humanity's greatest weapon, but they'd forgotten humanity's greatest strength, the ability to turn disaster into opportunity. "Open a channel to all ships," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Priority 1, encrypted frequency." "Channel open," Wilson confirmed. Sarah took a deep breath. What she was about to propose was either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. But then, that was practically humanity's signature move at this point. "All ships, this is Commander Chen. What I'm about to tell you goes against every simulation we've run, every protocol we've established. But right now, those protocols are exactly what the enemy is counting on." She paused, watching as another section of the quantum bridge blazed with failing containment warnings. "We're going to do something that no one, not even our own scientists, thought was possible. We're going to split the bridge." The shocked silence that followed was broken only by the steady warnings of failing systems. What Sarah was proposing wasn't just dangerous. It was theoretically impossible. The quantum bridge was barely stable as a single network. Trying to split it while containing a massive energy weapon. But she could see it now, the pattern hidden in the chaos, the possibility that no one had considered because it was too reckless, too unthinkable. The same way splitting ships during combat had seemed impossible until Captain Hayes proved otherwise. "Sir," Wilson's voice was quiet, "if we're wrong about this, then we're dead anyway," Sarah finished. She opened the channel again. "All ships, stand by for new coordinates. We're about to show the Zarkax why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of our weapons or our technology, but because we never, ever stop innovating." As she began transmitting the new formation coordinates, Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. The Zarkax thought they had countered humanity's ultimate weapon. They were about to learn that with humans, there was always another surprise waiting. Sarah's fingers danced across her console, inputting the final coordinates for what could either be humanity's greatest triumph or its last stand. The quantum bridge connecting Earth's ships glowed like a constellation caught in a storm, energy surging and failing in patterns that seemed random but held a hidden purpose. "All ships report ready," Wilson announced, his voice tight with tension. "Quantum cores are at critical levels. We have maybe 2 minutes before total system failure." The Zarkax ships had finished their encirclement, their weapons charged and ready. Their commander's voice crackled through the comm system one last time. "A valiant effort, humans, but it's over. Your bridge is failing. Your ships are trapped. Accept the inevitable with dignity." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Lieutenant Wilson, send the execution codes. All ships on my mark." She took a deep breath, thinking of Captain Hayes and her impossible maneuver that had started all this. "Remember, we're not trying to maintain the bridge anymore. We're going to ride its collapse." The Zarkax weapons energy still swirled within the quantum network, a purple maelstrom of destructive power held in check by humanity's failing technology. But Sarah had seen something in the collapse pattern that everyone else had missed. It wasn't just breaking down, it was trying to split naturally, following the same principles that allowed their ships to divide. Mark. In that instant, every human ship activated their modified quantum protocols simultaneously. Instead of fighting to maintain the bridge's integrity, they began to guide its collapse, using the very instabilities the Zarkax weapon had created to their advantage. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The quantum bridge didn't just split, it shattered into dozens of smaller networks, each one connecting a cluster of human ships. The contained weapon energy, instead of breaking free in a massive wave, was channeled into these smaller bridges. "It's working," Wilson exclaimed, his professional demeanor cracking with excitement. "The energy is, Commander, you need to see this." On the tactical display, Sarah watched as something extraordinary happened. The smaller quantum networks weren't just containing the energy. They were reshaping it, using the Zarkax's own weapon to create something entirely new. "All ships, Phase 2, she ordered. Execute the Hayes maneuver." The human fleet moved with perfect coordination, each cluster of ships using their mini bridges to accelerate in ways that should have been impossible. They were literally surfing the quantum wake of the Zarkax weapon, turning its destructive power into pure momentum. "Impossible!" The Zarkax commander's voice had lost all its arrogance, replaced by genuine fear. "Their speed, they're moving faster than our targeting systems can track." Sarah's smile grew fiercer. "That's because you're still thinking in straight lines. Lieutenant Wilson, show them why humans love roller coasters." The divided human fleet began to move in elaborate spiral patterns, each cluster of ships connected by their quantum mini-bridges. The maneuver looked chaotic, almost random, until the tactical display zoomed out to show the bigger picture. They weren't just avoiding enemy fire. They were weaving a new kind of quantum web around the Zarkax fleet, using their own weapons' energy to create a trap of impossible geometry. "Status of the primary weapon containment?" Sarah asked, watching as the pattern grew more complex. "Energy is stable within the mini bridges," Wilson reported. "We're actually drawing power from it now. The more they try to disrupt the network, the stronger our control becomes." The Zarkax ships began to fire desperately, but their weapons couldn't lock onto the human vessels as they danced through quantum space. Each shot that missed only added more energy to the growing web, strengthening the effect. "Sir," Wilson's voice took on a tone of awe, "the quantum field, it's starting to affect their ships. The space around them is folding." Sarah nodded. This was the true purpose of Project Starbridge, the real reason they had built their ships so small. It was never about combat effectiveness. It was about creating quantum anchor points precise enough to reshape space itself. "Send the final code," she ordered. "Let's show them why you should never corner a species that turned quantum physics into an art form." With a command that would have been impossible just 10 minutes ago, the human fleet activated their quantum cores one last time. The web of many bridges suddenly contracted, warping the space around the Zarkak's fleet into a configuration that violated several laws of physics. The alien ships found themselves trapped in a bubble of distorted spacetime, their own weapons' energy turned against them to create a prison they couldn't escape. Their massive vessels, once so threatening, were now as helpless as flies in amber. To all Zarkak's ships, Sarah broadcast, allowing herself to savor the moment. "Your weapons are useless in distorted space. Your engines can't function in this quantum field. You have precisely one option remaining." She paused, remembering all the times alien species had mocked humanity's primitive understanding of physics. "You can surrender to our tiny fleet." The silence that followed was broken by Wilson's quiet laugh. "Commander, they're powering down their weapons. All ships. They're actually surrendering." Sarah leaned back in her chair, feeling the tension of the battle finally begin to ease. "Send word to Fleet Command. Tell them," she smiled, thinking of how this battle would be remembered. "Tell them the impossible just became possible. Again." But as she watched the tactical display, something caught her eye. A strange reading from the quantum field that shouldn't have been there. She frowned, leaning forward to study it more closely. Lieutenant Wilson analyzed that energy signature on the edge of the distortion field. "Something about it seems." Her voice trailed off as the readings became clear. The Zarkak's fleet might have surrendered, but Sarah Chin suddenly realized that this battle wasn't over. In fact, it might have been just the beginning. Because there, hidden in the quantum fluctuations, was a pattern she'd seen only once before, in classified files about humanity's first contact with alien life. A pattern that suggested their entire war with the Zarkaks might have been orchestrated by something else, something that had been watching and waiting all along. As she prepared to alert Fleet Command to her discovery, Sarah couldn't help but smile grimly. Humanity had just proved itself to be one of the most dangerous species in known space, and apparently they had attracted the attention of something that had been counting on exactly that. The days following humanity's victory over the Zarkak's fleet were filled with a strange mixture of celebration and unease. As Sarah Chen stood before the United Earth Defense Council, presenting her findings about the mysterious quantum signature, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had won a battle but stumbled into a much larger war. "The pattern matches nothing in our current database," she explained, gesturing to the holographic display showing the complex energy readings. "Except for this." With a quick command, she brought up the classified first contact files. "This signal was detected moments before we received our first transmission from alien life, 15 years ago. At the time, our sensors weren't sophisticated enough to analyze it properly." Admiral Torres leaned forward, his expression grave. "And you're certain this isn't some sort of echo from the quantum bridge?" "Absolutely certain, sir." Sarah highlighted specific sections of the data stream. "These patterns are too precise, too deliberate. Someone was watching our battle with the Zarkaks, and they were using advanced quantum technology to do it. Technology that makes our breakthrough look primitive in comparison." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had just proved itself capable of reshaping space itself, and apparently that had been the point all along. "Commander Chen," Council President Rivers spoke up, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "What you're suggesting, that our entire conflict with the Zarkaks was engineered by another species, was a test," Sarah finished. "Yes, Madam President. Think about it. The Zarkaks' weapon was perfectly designed to disrupt our quantum bridge, but that disruption created exactly the patterns we needed to develop our space folding technique. It's like someone gave both sides pieces of a puzzle and waited to see if we could solve it. The silence that followed was broken by Dr. Anna Patul, Earth's leading quantum physicist. She's right, the scientist said, studying the data with growing excitement. These patterns, they're not just similar to our quantum bridge technology. They're like seeing college calculus when we've just invented basic arithmetic. Whoever left this signal wants us to know they're out there, and they want us to know we passed their test. Sarah nodded, bringing up the final piece of evidence. There's more. When we analyzed the surrendered Zarkak ships, we found something interesting. She displayed a new set of readings. Their quantum technology isn't actually compatible with the weapon they used against us. It's like they were given advanced tech they didn't fully understand, pointed at Earth, and set loose to see how we'd respond. Torres finished, his expression darkening. The perfect test. 2 species, each given different pieces of advanced technology, forced to either destroy each other or innovate. But why? One of the council members demanded. Why go to all this trouble? Sarah took a deep breath. This was the part that had kept her awake for the past 3 nights. Because humanity just proved we can do something remarkable. We can take seemingly incompatible technologies and find ways to make them work together. We don't just adapt, we innovate in ways other species don't expect. She gestured to the tactical replay of the battle. Look at what we did. We took a weapon designed to destroy us and turned it into a tool for manipulating space itself. We didn't just survive. We fundamentally changed how quantum physics can be applied in combat situations. And we did it all because we chose to think differently about size and scale. You think this was some sort of recruitment test? Rivera asked, her eyes widening with understanding. I think, Sarah said carefully, that there's something coming that requires exactly the kind of thinking humanity just demonstrated. And I think whoever left this signal wants us to be ready for it. As if in response to her words, every screen in the council chamber suddenly flickered. The quantum signature that Sarah had detected began to shift and change, transforming into something new. It's a message, Dr. Petal breathed, her fingers flying across her tablet. They're actually reaching out. The quantum signal stabilized, forming patterns that Earth's computers began to translate. As the message became clear, Sarah felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. Humanity had just been invited to join something much bigger than their regional conflicts with species like the Zarkaks. The real question was, were they ready for what came next? The message was elegant in its simplicity. You have demonstrated the ability to transcend the expected. The coming challenge will require such thinking on a galactic scale. We are the architects of the quantum veil, and we welcome humanity to the true frontier. President Rivera looked around the council chamber, meeting each member's eyes before settling on Sarah. Commander Chen, it seems your tiny fleet has attracted some very big attention. The question is, what do we do about it? Sarah stepped forward, her voice firm. We do what humanity does best, Madam President. We adapt. We innovate. And most importantly, she smiled, thinking of how far they'd come from being dismissed as a primitive species. We prove that size really doesn't matter when you're willing to rewrite the rules of the universe itself. Admiral Torres nodded slowly. Well said, Commander. And the Zarkaks? What do we do with them? We show them why humans are different, Sarah replied. We help them understand their technology better. We turn enemies into allies, because something tells me we're all going to need to work together for whatever comes next. As the council began discussing the practical aspects of humanity's new situation, Sarah's mind wandered to Captain Hayes and her seemingly reckless maneuver that had started all this. One person's desperate gamble had led humanity to completely revolutionize space warfare, and now they were being invited to help reshape the galaxy itself. A message appeared on her personal tablet, a priority communication from the Quantum Research Division. They had begun analyzing the full signal from the architects, and what they were finding was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. The technology being hinted at in the transmission made their recent breakthrough look like a child's first steps. But that was okay. Humanity had never been afraid of starting small and dreaming big. They had just proved that the smallest ships in the galaxy could change the nature of space itself. Whatever challenges the architects had in mind, Earth would face them the same way they faced everything, with innovation, adaptability, and the unique human ability to turn limitations into advantages. As Sarah prepared to dive into the new data, she allowed herself a moment to appreciate the irony. The galaxy had mocked humanity's tiny fleet, never realizing that size had been a deliberate choice, not a limitation, but a strategy. Now, that same thinking was about to take them to the next level of cosmic evolution. The Zarkak's commander, now a cooperative prisoner, had asked her a question during his official surrender. How did you know it would work? The quantum bridge splitting was supposed to be impossible. Sarah's answer had made him laugh for the first time since they'd met. That's the thing about humans. The word impossible just sounds like a challenge to us, and we love proving people wrong. As the quantum signal continued to unfold with new information, Sarah Chen smiled, thinking about all the impossible things humanity would probably end up doing next. The galaxy had mocked their tiny fleet, but that fleet had just earned humanity a seat at a table they hadn't even known existed. Sometimes, it turned out, the smallest things really did make the biggest differences. The council session ended with a clear directive. Earth would accept the architect's invitation, but on their own terms. They would go into this new frontier the same way they approached everything, carefully, creatively, and with an eye toward turning apparent weaknesses into unexpected strengths. As Sarah left the council chamber, her tablet chiming with new data from the quantum signal, she thought about how this story would be told in the future. How would they explain the day humanity went from being dismissed as primitives to being recruited by one of the most advanced species in the galaxy? The answer, she realized, was pretty simple. They would tell the truth. They would talk about a species that refused to be limited by size or strength, that chose to think differently, that turned physics itself into an art form. They would tell the story of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to look at the impossible and say, well, why not? And somewhere out there, the architects of the quantum veil were waiting to see what impossible things humanity would do next. Sarah had a feeling they wouldn't be disappointed.